Christmas Day, 1521. Although the date is debated on by whether it was Christmas or if the year was even 1521, the history books do their best to describe this event with the fact it was hardly recorded or ever even spoken about. It was anything but a peaceful morning on the Nueva Isabella sugar plantation in the northwest outskirts of Santo Domingo City. Tension was high due to the Spanish colonial government ruling over the enslaved peoples of Hispaniola Island, and the Spanish did not relent. It is never stated what exact time this happened, but a revolt was being planned, a big one that participants wouldn't realize would end up being the first recorded slave revolt in the Americas. The enslaved people of Santo Domingo were at their wits' end with the harsh treatment they had been receiving. They wanted more. They wanted freedom, liberation, to be unleashed from the cages of their captors. And the slaves weren't alone. They had united in secrecy with the native Indians of the island, who were also tired of the Spanish rule. It was their island. Who could blame them? No source can say how or when exactly this happened, but sometime during the day, fighting occurred on the Nueva Isabella plantation. It was a revolt, and a large one at that. Numbers of casualties were never recorded, but estimates could be made around the hundreds. Many slave and Indians fought for their freedom against the large numbers of slave owners and the powerful brute force of the Spanish colonial government. Fires were started. Buildings were destroyed. Crops were trampled. Not just liberation, but their lives were on the line. Unfortunately, what came next was no closer to liberation than the day before. After many losses, the Spanish were able to suppress the revolt and claim victory over the enslaved. Things did not become easier, because in January of the next year, stricter rules were created and enforced to keep slaves from revolting again. Freedom would not be secured until centuries later in Santo Domingo, but even with the loss of so many, their impact will never be forgotten. They will forever be known as the heroes of Santo Domingo, who bravely fought for liberation, and will continue to be known in history as the first ever slave revolt in the Americas.
Kahala Yahweh B'Shem Yashayah B'Shem Kokodash, which are the true Hebrew names of the Most High Father, Yahweh, which is Hebrew for He is, and His only begotten Son, Yahweh, which is Hebrew for He is salvation. Double honors my teachers, the apostles and elders of the great millstone. Peace and mercy to the elect, with the house of David reborn again in this generation. And Shalom to the 130 Yashayah, who today are known as the Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, who before losing our true heritage, we were known as, and still are, the true Hebrew Israelites of the Holy Bible. In today's lesson, we're going to be talking about the tribe of Simeon, who today are known as the Dominicans, which come from the Dominican Republic. Now, in the video we just watched, it covered a fairly big part of history regarding the tribe of Simeon in their state of captivity. Now, as you just heard, this was the first recorded slave revolt amongst the tribes here in the Americas. Now, unfortunately, it didn't succeed, but it was spiritual in nature, which we're going to get into in just a bit. But let's go ahead and move on and talk about the tribe of Simeon today. So, like I said, the tribe of Simeon are known as the Dominicans today. Come from our forefather Jacob's and his first wife Leah, and he was the second born son to Jacob. Now, Simeon, when you get into who he was part of the northern kingdom. And if you've been watching these lessons, you understand that the northern kingdom today would be known as the Latinos and the Native Americans, and that the northern kingdom was kicked out of the land of Israel during 722 BC, and they were carried over to Assyria, and then eventually they made their way over here to America. And this is recorded in 2nd Ezra 13 and 40. Let's go and read it. This is 2nd Ezra 13 and 40. Those are the 10 tribes which were carried away prisoners out of their own land in the time of Yashayah, the king, whom Salmanasar, the king of Assyria, led away captive. And he carried them over the waters, and so came they into another land. And so right there it's talking about when we, Northern Kingdom, Israelites, the Latinos and Native Americans, we were taken out of the land of Israel. And this took place, like I said, in 722 BC. And what happened is we unfortunately fell away from the Lord because we did not obey him. We started to worship other gods of the other nations that surrounded us, and we just basically broke our contract we had made with the Lord, which was something that we were warned about when we had came out of Egypt. Okay, but what happened is, after being carried away to Assyria, we eventually were freed close to about 100 years later, when the Babylonians attacked Assyria and conquered it. The native and Latino nations, the Northern Kingdom of Israel, were free from captivity. Now, what unfortunately happened is that the Assyrians had this thing where when they would conquer a people, they would take them out of their lands and they would bring foreigners to dwell in that land to stop the people to return to those lands and hence rebuild their civilization and possibly rise up again. So us Northern Kingdom Israelites, after being freed, a lot of us stayed in the area. Some of us went to other parts of the known world at that time, as the Silk Road was a big trail of commerce during that period. And also some of us went back, but we went down to the Southern Kingdom. Okay, you can hear of examples of some of the Northern Kingdom Israelites amongst the apostles in the New Testament. Now, the majority of us, through the leadership of the tribe of Ephraim being the Puerto Ricans, had decided to come over here to the Americas to basically separate ourselves from all the heathen nations, so that way we could try to keep the laws and not have to face being punished again by the Lord. Now let's go and get back to the scriptures and read that. Verse 41. But they took this counsel amongst themselves, that they would leave the multitude of the heathen and go forth into a further country where never mankind dwelt, that they might there keep their statutes which they never kept in their own land. And they entered into the Euphrates by the narrow places of the river. For the Most High then showed signs for them, and held still the flood, till they were passed over. For through that country there was a great way to go, namely 1.5 years, and the same region is called Azareth. Now Azareth, it is known through many biblical scholars to be the Americas. Okay, now the name Azareth basically means another land, okay, or unknown land. Now the tribe of Simeon came over here to the Americas with the other 10 tribes of the Northern Kingdom, and they were part of the 10 tribes, I should say, and they ultimately settled there on the island of Hispaniola, which today is split into two, between Haiti, which is the tribe of Levi, and the Dominican Republic, which are the tribe of Simeon. Now this here ties ultimately into their future prophecy. And what do I mean by that? Well, when you get into the Bible, the way that you could identify who the tribes are today is that you got to look at the prophecies and also the individual son's blessing that they received. Because not only were we told that the curses that the Lord would put upon us would be a sign unto all the nations of the world of that could be used to identify who the true Israelites are, but every son of Jacob received a blessing and basically a future prophecy of what their descendants would be doing. Now, the prophecy that Jacob gave onto his son Simeon was connected to his son Levi as well. You see, well, let's go and read it, and then I'm going to break it down. This is Genesis 49:5. Simeon and Levi are brethren. Instruments of cruelty are in their habitations. O my soul, come not thou into their secret, unto their assembly. Mine honor, be not thou united. For in their anger they slew a man, and in their self-will they dig down a wall. Cursed be their anger, for it was fierce, and their wrath, for it was cruel. I will divide them in Jacob, and scatter them in Israel. Now, this is a fairly it's a multiple part prophecy. Okay, we're going to start at the very beginning, right, where it says Simeon and Levi are brethren. Why is it that they are mentioned here together? Well, these two brothers have a connected path in the Bible. Okay, and also because these prophecies here were prophecies that told what would happen to each brother at the end days. This signifies that these two tribes would be next to each other, right? They would basically be living together. Now, when you look at the map of Hispaniola, right, basically the island which the Haitians and the Dominicans live, it's broken up in half. Okay, you got the Dominican Republic here on the right, and then you have Haiti here on the left. Now, both of these islands were conquered by different nations, right? Basically, both Edomites, though, or powered or ruled over by the Edomites during the times of their captivity. For example, the Dominican Republic, right, which were like for the most part Taino Indians, right, at that time when they were found by Columbus and the Spaniards. They were found by the Spaniards, and the Spaniards basically ruled that portion of that land. Now, the Haitians, they ultimately were ruled by the French, who came, later on, and they imported African or so-called African slaves, which were the tribe of Levi. Again, and why is that? Well, because through the Lord's, power, He willed it so that way the tribe of Levi and the tribe of Simeon would be together on the same island. Okay, and how did that happen? Well, when you look at the let's go back here, right? So here on the 2nd Ezra 13 and 40, it shows the path that the tribe of Simeon, along with the other Northern Kingdom tribes, came to the Americas. And while they were here, they, for the most part, were here in the Americas for about 2,500 years before they were discovered by the European nations, right? The Edomites that came over and ultimately put them into captivity. Well, during those 2,500 years, the tribe of Simeon eventually migrated up here to what they refer to as the Pearl Island of the Caribbean, or was called, Hispaniola when it was discovered. Now, about 400 years later, or not 400 years later, excuse me, I think 100 years later, they started to bring over, it was about about 100 years later, a little bit more than 100 years later, they started to bring over slaves from the west coast of Africa, right? And they basically took them all the way from Senegal all the way down to Angola. And really all the slaves that were taken off of here didn't all necessarily come from the west coast of Africa. They came from all over Africa, but they were all, for the most part, Israelites, okay, of their, respective tribes. Now there was, a tribe of Judah, the tribe of Levi, and the tribe of Benjamin amongst them. Now the Israelites who had ended up on the island of Hispaniola were the Levites, okay? Now, that being said, that's why in and the prophecy or that Jacob gave to Simeon, his prophecy is matched up with his brother Levi because they are going to live with each other on that same land. Okay, now, or that signifies that they would be living together. Now, next, when it says here, O my soul, come not thou into their secret, unto their assembly, right? And also where it says, instruments of cruelty are in their habitation. That's ultimately talking about the witchcraft that both of those nations, the Haitians and the Dominicans, use. Okay, when you get into the witchcraft that they use there, it's referred to as Dominican voodoo, right? And the Haitian is just referred to as, voodoo, right? So let's go and read this real quick. It says, Dominican voodoo, popularly known as the Las 21 Divisiones, is a heavily Catholicized syncretic religion of African Caribbean origins which developed in the former Spanish colony of Santo Domingo on the island of Hispaniola. Now, let's see, it says, let me just skip down here to the part where it actually talks about the Dominican portion, because it gives you the Haitian, the Haitian example of the witchcraft that they use, which we'll get into in my other lesson when I get into the tribe of Levi. But in this case, since we're focusing on the tribe of Simeon, we're going to focus on the Dominicans, their aspects of their witchcraft. It says, the Dominican voodoo practitioners are often called caballeros, which means horses, brujos, witch doctors, or servidores, servants. But they are also known as papabocos, papalaos, which means priest, mama mambos, and mama laos, which are priestess. One who has obtained this title has gone through the last and highest level of initiation, which can take anywhere between 3 to 9 days and nights, as well as have spent a time working for the community. And I think they got to do things like help heal the community, or do spells for the community, like limpias and stuff like that. And I know through just knowing some Dominican Republicans, they're really into this brujeria, man. Like they do a lot of limpias, and they do a lot of like love spells, man. This is part of their of their culture, and that's because this inhabits their tribes, okay? And that's why it was prophesied that they would be into this stuff, right? This is just it says a burial ceremony, right? So the point being is that this is that's what that means, right? That instruments of cruelty, that's basically witchcraft, okay? And then next, when and that's also where it says, "Oh my soul," their secret. Again, it's talking about the witchcraft that Levi and Simeon are going to be into in the last days, right? And right here it says, "For in their anger they slew a man, and in their self-will they dig down a wall." Now, what this is ultimately talking about is what Simeon and Levi did in regards to taking revenge for their sister Dinah. Now, let's go ahead and read the story, and then I'll get into it a little bit more. This is Genesis 34 and 24. "And unto Hamor and unto Shechem, his son, hearkened all that went out of the gate of his city, and every male were circumcised, all that went out of the gate of his city. And it came to pass on the third day, when they were sore, that two of the sons of Jacob, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brethren, took each man a sword, and came up upon the city boldly, and slew all the males. And they slew Hamor and Shechem his son with the edge of the sword, and took Dinah out of Shechem's house, and went out. The sons of Jacob came up upon the slain, and spoiled the city, because they had defiled their sister. They took their sheep and their oxen and their asses, and that which was in the city, and that which was in the field, and all their wealth, and all their little ones, and their wives took they captives, and spoiled even all that was in the house. And Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, Ye have troubled me to make me to stink amongst the inhabitants of the land, amongst the Canaanites and the Perizzites. And I, being few in number, they shall gather themselves together against me and slay me, and I shall be destroyed, I and my house. So what had happened here is that, remember, as Israelites, we have been commanded not to join on to these other nations, not to marry on to the other nations that surrounded us. Now, this prince here, this Hamite prince, Shechem, he ultimately had a thing for one of the sisters of the 12 sons of Jacob, Dinah. Okay, Dinah was Jacob's only daughter, and this prince basically took her. Okay, and he probably talked her up, and he had his way with her. And this in the Bible is considered rape. This is why it said that he had raped her. Okay, now because this was a great dishonor amongst our people to give our people to the other nations, these two brothers seen it as a great dishonor to our people, and they decided to take actions into their own hands. Now, the characteristics of the attack that they did is similar to what took place in the first video that we watched. Again, the actions of this right here is that after the Prince Shechem had taken Dinah, he had basically came, or should I say his father, Hamor, came to our forefather Jacob and basically asked for Dinah to be wed to his son. And he had asked to make a pact with the Hamites and with us Hebrews. Now, this was against God's will, which is why ultimately this took place. But our forefather Jacob saw that it was fine, because when you get into these people, these Hamites, they were cool with our forefathers, right? They allowed Abraham to stay in that land, and they basically had made friends with them. I think they even gave us lands to bury our our people in that land, right? So what happened is Jacob, our forefather, had made a treaty with them. Now, Simeon and Levi had basically made a little stipulation that if they wanted to marry, if Shechem wanted to marry Dinah and also join on to the Israelites, that all the males had to circumcise themselves, right? And these Hamites, thinking that they could join on to us, they went ahead and did it, thinking that they were going to be in a good case. Now, ultimately, they were deceived by Simeon and Levi, because they went and they against their word, and we just read what they had done. Now, this was such a bad thing that our forefather Jacob had said, right? That they had troubled him amongst the people in that land, that their actions had made him to stink. Now, what does that mean? That basically means that they had basically ruined his reputation amongst all the Canaanites in that land, right? They probably more likely had started to be seen as like thieves and murderers. Now, that's ultimately why in the prophecy right here it says that cursed be their anger, for it was fierce, and their wrath, for it was cruel. Okay, and this is why ultimately Levi, and Simeon received what they had received. When you look at Levi, even though he was given the service to the Lord and he was made the priest, he didn't get an allotment of land in the land of Israel. When you look at the tribes, Levi wasn't given any land. His lands were ultimately amongst the suburbs of all the tribes, right? All the other cities of the tribes. Now, Simeon because he became a small tribe, right? He didn't even get a blessing from Moses, right, before they went into the land like the other nations did, right? Simeon didn't get a blessing from Moses, and also his portion of land was basically pulled out of the portion which was given to Judah, which was too much for Judah, like it had said in the scriptures, right? So they basically got the leftovers from Judah. So that right there is the curse that came upon them, and that's what that prophecy says. Okay, so now that we understand, how this prophecy of Simeon and also Levi, but we're focusing on Simeon here, how their prophecy is, breaks down. Now we understand why we know that the Dominican Republic, or the Dominicans and the Haitians, are Simeon and Levi, right? Because again, Jacob also said that he was going to scatter them, and that he was also going to divide them, right? What does it say? Cursed be their habitations, and I will divide them in Jacob, which means they would not come together. And when you look at the divisions between the Haitians and the Dominicans, they hate each other, unfortunately, right? There's a big class division. The Haitians are living in poverty. It is crazy how horrible they have it in this land. But when you look at the Dominicans, they're doing a lot better, right? Their social economic status is way better than the Haitians, and even the Haitians that go over to the Dominican side to get groceries and like that, they're treated like second class citizens. And again, this is just the division that came upon them because they were cursed. Now let's go ahead and get back to real quick. I just want to talk about the Santo Domingo slave revolt, right? So one crazy thing about this is that the governor who owned all this land, who this plantation had belonged to, was actually Christopher Columbus's son, Diego Columbus, right? And he ultimately led the Spaniards to capture and ultimately, take the land back and stuff. But let's go and read real quick a passage out of this book. It's called Black Indians, A Hidden Heritage, from William Lawrence Katz. And it tells us here on page 33 basically about the Santo Domingo revolt, right? So this gives a little bit of better insight into what actually happened, and to show you the similarities of kind of like you say, like the underhandedness of how the Haitians and the Dominicans attacked the Spaniards, right? How they were in a unassuming, caught off guard way, just like how the Shechem and the Hamites were caught off guard when they were attacked by Simeon and Levi. All right, it says in 1522, Europeans in the Americas first learned that slavery did not easily lead to enormous wealth. On Christmas Day, African and Indian slaves, right? African would be the Levites, the Indians would be the tribe of Simeon, on a plantation owned by Diego Columbus, rose and murdered their masters. Overseers, nearby Native Americans, joined the rebels. The beautiful island of Hispaniola shook with the first recorded slave rebellion in the New World. The conspiracy had spread across the sprawling sugar plantations in the weeks before Christmas. Patiently, the plotters waited until Christmas Day, when the planters and their families would be bloated with food, soaked with liquor, and too weak or sleepy to offer much resistance. So you see that? So just like in the biblical reference to the attack on the Hamites, just like how Levi and Simeon waited for the third day for them to attack the Hamites because they knew they were going to be in a weakened state, they did the exact same thing here too, right? They waited for their enemies to be in a weakened, disoriented state before they attacked them. Continuing, it says, Then they struck, plunging into the night to kill whites and find freedom. For 2 days they met little opposition, but on the third, Spanish troops caught up with the rebels in an open field. Open fired. The fugitives broke for the woods, and Europeans were unfamiliar with the treacherous terrain near the city of Santo Domingo. Few were willing to pursue their most dangerous slaves into an area suited for guerrilla warfare. Governor Diego Columbus, his Spanish troops, and advisors decided on a new strategy. The governor hired Native Americans for a dangerous task of tracking fugitives. A hunt began. The exact outcome is unclear. So you see, so that right there is what took place during the Santo Domingo revolt. Okay, and that right there is just I wanted to show you the similarities between what Levi and Simeon did in the land of Israel against the against the Canaanites, the Hamites, and how he also came against his enemies. How both of them came against their enemies there on the island of Hispaniola, right? But again, this is all part of prophecy, and this is just how the way the Spirit works with these tribes, that we're going to be doing the same things that we had done in the past, right? Or should I say similar things, and that now that we know who the tribes are, in this case Simeon, we understand why they're there on that island along with their brethren, and why they haven't mingled amongst themselves, right? Even though there's a lot of socioeconomic reasons why there's a split, spiritually it's because that was a curse put upon those two brethren, that they would, keep them together but keep them divided, okay? And that's because they both received that curse. Now, let's go and read this. This is Zephaniah 3:15. Yahweh, Bashem Yashayah, hath taken away thy judgments. He hath cast out thine enemies. The King of Israel, even Yahweh, is in the midst of thee. Thou shalt not see evil any more. And that day it shall be said to Jerusalem, Fear thou not, and to Zion, let not thine hand be slack. Yahweh, Bashem Yashayah, thy power in the midst of thee is mighty. He will save, and he will rejoice over thee with joy. He will rest in his love. He will joy over thee with singing. And I will gather them that are sorrowful for the solemn assembly, who are of thee, to whom the reproach of it was a burden. So you see, though we are still in a captive-like state, or should I say a downtrodden state, the Lord is soon going to redeem all of us, no matter what state we are in, be it that we're up here in the Americas and are living well, or down there in these islands living like in a third world situation, right? All these things are for building us up, for cultivating us, for getting us ready for what's to come. And what's to come is what I just read, right? That our judgments are at an end, right? We are now at the end of our captivity, and now it's time for us to get our promise. And that promise is that we would be co-rulers with the Lord when he comes back, right? When the king that is amongst us, that being Yahweh, we're going to be joint rulers with him. Okay, and we're going to be ruling over the world, and all this downtroddenness that we're basically living through now, it's all going to be a thing of the past. And all these things that we went through are going to be for us to understand that it was to build up our character and to harden us. This is Jeremiah 30:3. For lo, the day comes, saith Yahweh Bashem Yashayah, that I will bring again the captivity of my people Israel and Judah, saith Yahweh Bashem Yashayah, and I will cause them to return to the land that I gave to their fathers, and they shall possess it. And so that's what's going on. So Simeon, the Dominicans, They are the biblical Israelites. And because of that, they are going to be part of the new ruling class once the Lord returns back and gives us our inheritance that we've been waiting for ever since our forefather Abraham was promised it. Until then, we have to live in our lots. We have to live with the punishment that we were given. And for the 2/3 of our people who aren't going to get this message, they're not going to believe, they're going to be too busy worrying about worldly things, they're going to have to die on this side before they're reborn through reincarnation into the world where we're ruling, and then they'll be raised up right, and then they'll get to experience heaven on earth. But for those 1 out of every 3 Negro, Latino, Native Americans, and anybody whose father's lineage goes back to that bloodline, we only got a short while to go until we, Lord willing, that's us, are able to experience this, right? To be taken back to the land and to be redeemed by the Lord because of what he had done for us, to come back, be crucified, give his life as a sacrifice for us so we could return to the Father, right? It's a beautiful thing. And now we are at the end of all that, Akim. So either way, hopefully this video was edifying. Hopefully I was able to break down the tribe of Simeon and how they are the Dominicans today, and explain how their prophecy breaks down. So with all that, let's give all honor and glory and praises to Yahweh, B'Hashem Yashayah, B'Hashem Reshare. Shalom.